Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. Today I'm joined by Julia Taffe, Artistic Director of Aeriosa. Choreographer Julia Taffe combines art, environment and adventure, making dances for buildings, mountains, neighborhoods, theaters and trees, finding new movement perspectives in the realm of suspension. As the Artistic Director of Aeriosa, which is a Vancouver-based vertical dance company, Julia has choreographed over 25 works on location, including Stromus Chief Mountain in Squamish, Taipei City Hall, Cirque du Soleil Headquarters, Vancouver Library Square, Banff Centre, Scotiabank Dance Centre, and Toronto's 58-story L Tower. Prior to founding Aeriosa, Julia performed across Canada with Ruth Cansfield and around the world with Bandaloop. Julia attained ACMG Rock Guide certification in 1997. Julia, welcome. So glad we get this opportunity in the midst of all the craziness and busyness to actually just kind of connect and share your adventures, your stories, your projects, where you're at with Aeriosa Dance with our listeners. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, joining me. Let's start with how you found aerial dance or vertical dance, as you call it, and maybe a little bit about training or milestones.
Well, I found my way to where I am as a vertical choreographer. It was a journey through my practice as a contemporary dancer. So I trained in many different dance forms that contemporary dancers train in: ballet, jazz, all of the old classics, and had a very traditional, rigorous training, and then became a professional right out of high school in Winnipeg. And I was part of a group that founded a new dance company in the city, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a great opportunity to create original work. And, you know, the thing about being in a small dance company like that is we had a season, which was very specific, and then we had a lot of time off as well. And I would say for myself, that's when my interests in movement above the ground came about, because I had a lot of friends that were enthralled with rock climbing, which is pretty funny actually, because Winnipeg is totally flat.
Mm-hmm. It's great. I love it.
and yet they were very adventurous and would drive to Northern Ontario, to the Lake of the Woods area, which is Canadian Shield. And there's these beautiful granite old mountains that are basically like mounds above the lake and cliffs above the lakes, and it was quite adventurous. So they were putting up climbing routes and teaching themselves how to climb from books. The whole climbing gym thing had basically just started at that point, because this was, you know, in the early 90s. It was just starting to get popular, and the Canadian military actually had a plywood climbing wall at one of their training facilities in Winnipeg.
Wow.
And so we would all go and sit in front of this, 16-foot wide plywood wall, and it would have, a few holds on it. And we would all ooh and ah. And it was thrilling for me, because it was so physical, and it was figuring out movement, which is very similar to choreography, discovering movement, figuring out how to do things that you imagine and don't know how to do, but training your body to be able to do them. And that kind of body intelligence was really appealing to me. And it got me out of the studio, which is one thing my dance career never gave me, was that connection to nature. And at that point, it was a real gap for me. Like I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be spending as much time as possible as I could. And yet, as I mentioned earlier, because my training was so rigorous, it was kind of discouraged as a dancer to be doing other physical pursuits, ooh, skiing's dangerous. Ooh, climbing, that's dangerous. You could get hurt and then you won't be able to dance.
Yeah. Yeah. Never dance could hurt. Yeah.
And also, what do you mean you're not going to a summer school? You have to train all the time. If you miss a week of training, you'll be a bad dancer.
Yeah.
I really did grow up with that kind of mentality, and it's something I had to shake off.
Mm-hmm.
So I came to climbing, and then that sort of led me away from dance. And I actually had an opportunity where I had to make a choice. A choreographer in Winnipeg, Stephanie Ballard, was continuing a project which was really amazing. She basically was getting all these women together and doing this work. It was multi-generational. And so we did a version in Winnipeg, and then she had this opportunity. We were all going to gather in New York, but I had already made a plan to go to the Yukon, to Dawson City, because this climbing thing had really triggered my need to be outdoors in nature. And so I actually said no to that project in New York, and I went up to the Yukon for the summer. And I had the opportunity to go out onto the land and do a really kind of risky climbing. It wasn't a climbing trip, it was a hiking trip, backcountry mountain trip with not a lot of skills and not enough planning. But it was a very powerful experience for me. And so those two things together kind of shifted my sense of my body, and my connection of my practice to the land. And I started to spend more time in British Columbia, in Squamish, where there was rock climbing available.
Mm-hmm. Is that what brought you to BC then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did have a few dance performances booked. Dancing on the Edge had allowed me to come and perform at the Fire Hall. And then Donna Spencer had given our choreographers in Winnipeg a mixed bill performance. So we came and did this show at the Fire Hall. And so I had these opportunities to kind of go back and forth. And all of a sudden, my dance season, working in the winter in Winnipeg and then having the summers free, all of a sudden allowed me to start training as a rock climbing guide in Squamish. So I started living in both locations for a few years and living a dual life.
Yeah.
And then as I trained to become a climbing guide, I realized, oh no, I've chosen another profession that has no hope of, earning me a decent living. And
very, very niche, particular. Yeah. That's wonderful. But the exploring, I love, the kind of the explorative nature of it, or the fact that that's what won you over, it seems, is like the space to explore and explore the body in spaces and not feel confined or not refined to the point of like ruling out other opportunities or ruling out, like you say, the environment or other spaces. I think that's really exciting. I feel like the gradual kind of the desire kind of grew from what you're talking about. I feel like it kind of started to consume you. I think it's amazing. So you obviously became a rock climbing guide. And I heard you were also a stunt performer. Is that correct? Have you done stunt work too?
Yes.
Yeah. You see, this is all kind of like diversifying your like not only income base, but also making it versatile. All of these different skills that you're learning, I think is so exciting. So could you talk a little bit about that maybe?
Yeah, well, the thing about being in Vancouver and being unemployed was that, the film industry is, it's a small world. Some of these worlds have overlap, right? And so being a climber, I knew some stunt riggers and stunt coordinators, and they knew that I was an athlete. And, stunts sounds very glamorous. And of course, it is a much higher paid job working in film and TV, and it's very, very unreliable. So in my case, one of the reasons that I started to get hired was because I had the skills to protect actors when they were filming scenes going climbing. So, I could set up the belays. I could rig a camera person to hang over the edge of a cliff. I could train an actor to know the things they would need to play a climber. So I got a few little jobs like that through word of mouth. And then the stunt coordinators that I met said, oh, we're looking for a double for Robbie Chong, who is the sister of Ray Don Chong. So I ended up doubling for those two sisters in a few bad TV shows. But
Excellent.
they weren't
So fun.
me.
I know what you mean, though. Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Yeah.
yeah.
But so anyways, I worked and so I got a little taste of that bug, get a nice paycheck and get fed at work and do some fun things. Yeah, it's a really interesting process. I actually really love the behind the scenes part of it, and I've done a lot of other roles in commercial film and TV.
Yeah.
I've made a few little films myself when I'm on a very small scale, with other filmmakers helping to produce.
Yeah, that's great. So do you continue to do that? Were you doing that before Aeriosa dance? Do you do it when you can with Aeriosa? Because you're so busy with Aeriosa dance as it is. Do you continue an independent consultancy kind of career?
Aeriosa is getting ready to do a TV shoot right now, which is not norm. We don't do a lot. The last one we did, I think, was 2015 or 2016.
Right.
So we do have one coming up, which is exciting because, emerging out of this pandemic world, most of the lucrative opportunities that we've had to collaborate and requests for performances have totally dried up, and they're just starting to come back.
Yeah.
To answer your question about do I still work in the film industry? Well, there came a moment in my career working in film where I was sitting around on set not being needed. I was writing grant applications to do projects, and we got this funding to do a Bravo video in the mountains, and I kind of went to the director of photography and said, okay, so, I gotta go. And that has been, that's really been my death knell in the film and TV commercial industry, is that ultimately, while I loved some of the jobs, I didn't love all of the jobs. There's a wide range of work you can do.
Yeah.
It just wasn't really for me. It wasn't physical. Oddly enough, it wasn't physical enough. It wasn't stimulating enough.
No.
And because I would say no to jobs sometimes, that is your death knell in film and TV. You have another life and you walk away from it, you don't get called again.
Yeah.
So I don't think I was never the best stunt performer, and I wasn't the keenest. So eventually, the industry got bigger and I kept getting older, and I just got busier and busier doing my live work and starting a dance company, which is something that I had never wanted to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, because I always say I never wanted to choreograph when I was younger. That's the one thing I said I would never ever do, and that's the thing I've done the most of so far. It's kind of shifting now, like you say, but that's the thing, right? You realize how consuming it would be, and then also how rewarding it would be for those reasons. And obviously you've found that with Aeriosa and being able to explore the things you've talked about already, the creative side, and overseeing the entire project, managing the time, managing all of those logistics that you've learned how to do, which we won't dwell on this, I promise. I think this is a really good time to talk about, well, maybe I'm really interested personally in where ideas for projects start with you, because I'm, as I am with every artist, and I know that it is always changing, but because you have location as such a big thing, or a site as such a big element of your work. And then also I'm imagining that you are invited by places for your work as well. So could you talk a little bit about how maybe different ideas have started, or how the projects you're working on now started, just in a kind of broad sense of what came first, in a way, if it's possible?
I'll start back at the mountains, because that's really where it started for me. My love of climbing and my job as a climber, to take people onto the cliffs in Squamish and to climb the Squamish Chief and to spend all of my time climbing. It's very similar to dancing at a high level. Like, you cannot take time off because you're not capable of doing the movements you need to do. And in climbing, if you can't do the movements, you can risk injury, you can risk death, and you can also risk not being able to complete your job if that is
Yes,
You're
right.
getting paid that day. So,
Exactly.
that shift in perspective about what risk is, the risk of
Hmm.
failure, really helped me with my dance. It
Mm,
made me it made me a much stronger performer, because my inhibitions, my fear of embarrassment, my fear of tripping or falling down, it just became so small,
yeah.
compared to, oh, if I fall here, I'm definitely going to break my ankle. I might flip upside down and get a head injury, and my client won't be able to rescue me. So that's not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so those things were really linked. And so for me, spending time on the Squamish Chief was very satisfying physically and creatively, my body learning movements and whatnot. But culturally, there was a gap, because I was trained as a dancer and I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in the culture of dance. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to dance on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew how to get to these really interesting places. Like, one of my films that I'm really fond of is called The Granite Ocean. And it really centered on this journey of, a woman emerging from a cocoon on this mountain face, and then climbing up to this little platform and growing wings and learning how to fly.
Mm.
And just to be able to dance on this triangular ledge, 1,000 feet off the ground, that was a couple of, not even a meter, like maybe a meter, 2 meters long, and 3 meters on either side, right? So
Wow.
it was very, to me, I wanted to dance in those places, and I wanted to bring that part of myself to the mountains. So we had to keep going back. Like, the first time we just went to explore these different locations and build the story, so that we would have a video to apply for funding to do the actual project.
Right.
And that little video that my friend Janet Rodden cut, we used that to explain what we wanted to do, but it also became a film in its own right, and it toured in the Mountain Film Festival circuit,
Amazing.
which
That's
is where I found my
great.
first audiences.
Yeah.
And that led to the invitation to create a live performance at the Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival. Many years ago, I think it was 1999, I did a solo performance for all these climbers at the Centennial Theatre
Theatre.
Center in North Vancouver. It was a packed
That's
house with
so
no
great.
dance audience.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's amazing. Great.
Yeah. And so that was really fun to have, a commission like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that also led to a commission at the Banff Center at the same time that our film premiere was premiering at the Banff Center. So I really had a lot of encouragement and support outside of the dance community to begin what
Yeah.
I was doing.
Oh,
And
that's wonderful.
I really needed it at that point, because it just did not feel like the dance community was ready for it,
Yeah.
in terms of, is this dance? Does it deserve funding? What is she talking about? That sounds dangerous. All these things were questions that I couldn't prove that that could be done other
Yeah.
than by doing it.
The relatability of it, like, so that they're already, from what you're talking about, there's already this sense of it being able to expand the movement audience, because the people who were coming to watch this had an understanding and an interest in mountaineering, and so they were not coming to gawk at it as spectacle in terms of that's unsafe or wow, how daring, because they have this insight into the safety, or into the rigor that goes into the practice. But then you introduce them to the creative side, the creative possibilities, which I think is, and then the relatability comes from, not from the dancers deciding that it's relatable, but from the audience deciding, a different audience deciding that they can relate to dance. I love stories like that. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, and climbers are creative, and they see things from different perspectives.
Hmm.
Unless you are a climber, you do not get that perspective of sitting on a tiny ledge looking down from the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
now that we have drones, those type of perspectives are becoming more available to people, and you see it in the camera work of films and commercials and photography and all of this. Our perspectives have shifted
Hmm.
based on the tools that we have, but climbers have had those, and they've had those perspectives as long as they've been climbing, and they have earned their right to be in those places with fear and sweat.
And that's a form of embodiment, which is so sophisticated and that we can't get from drones or from visual, having the visual representation of it. Like, that's an embodied, absolute experiential insight that these climbers have that is beyond, what, as you say, beyond what dance can teach us in our safe spaces.
And they are dancers because they have to learn movement in order to get where they want to go.
Yeah.
They have to discover movement. They've got to link movements. It's not just like, oh, now I know how to do this move. Sometimes I can only hold on to a hold for like 3 seconds before you have to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So you're using things like momentum and sequencing and patterning to be able to move. So there is that creativity there. And I think that my performance has triggered that awareness. It's
Mm-hmm.
where the support came from.
Absolutely. Drawing attention to suspension in the most, kind of like literal way can possibly to give us all a sense of what it would be is kind of exaggerated, from the dance perspective in the work you do. But then there's also the application of movement knowledge, right? That's what you're talking about, which essentially is a way of defining a good dancer, right? Is being able to apply the knowledge in the moment,
Well, and it's also, I think, it is applying the value of dance to us as humans and to our society. And I really feel at this point in my career as a dancer, it's much too overlooked as part of a value of professional dance, is tapping into that knowledge and making it accessible to more people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started out many, many years ago, it was very, very clearly defined roles. You're an audience, you're a performer, you're a dancer, you're not a dancer. In all aspects of performance, those things are becoming more blended and hopefully less hierarchical. And that's one thing I feel like I'm still wrapping my own head around is how can I reframe my work as a professional dancer to love all dancing bodies and to assess what's a good dance and what's not a good dance and who should be dancing. And, I'm really feeling quite rebellious against a lot of those things these days because I understand so much of the privilege that it takes to become a certain type of dancer, the cost, the time, the support, the encouragement, the gates that are in front of you. Who is deciding if you're a good dancer? Who is deciding if you get money to keep dancing? Who is like all of these things? They're only being cracked open now in terms of professional dance.
I completely agree. And also, like, who allows you to dance in public? In public spaces. So like concert dance is only a very small area of dance these days. But for that to have been defining what dance is for decades, maybe even centuries, is the work that we have to undo, right?
It really is. And also our role as professional dancers, how can we bring that value of dance to everyone so that it becomes more embedded in the culture and less of an us and them scenario? Because dance is so healing. We need it so much. And we're at such danger now of being digitized and, just becoming these meat sacks with eyes.
Yeah. Objet d'art, right? Just like these visual kind of like, just like, candy on the walls or on screens that you can kind of walk
So
by.
healing from trauma, for connecting, for just the joy and reminder of being human. I really want, at this point, I'm so interested in finding those opportunities and reinforcing those values, because it's really hard to kind of slip back away from them again and start categorizing things.
Yeah. So I think there's also like a sense of like, so some of your concepts actually take you into nature, like in the forest or in the trees. Was this Tofino? Were you in Tofino on the island for a project?
Well,
or is that what you're doing now?
That kind of takes us, back to that original question, like, where do your ideas come from?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my next anecdote about that is, so I moved to Tofino as a life balance decision. It was something that my partner and I decided that we wanted to do.
Beautiful.
And that happened in 2011, kind of when I was starting to feel like, yes, I know what I'm doing as a choreographer and an artistic director, and people believe I can do it.
Yes.
Yay! And at that moment, I moved away from the city, which is not, that's not the best career move.
I know it seems counterintuitive, but at the same time,
You
balance. It's about
know,
balance,
yeah,
you
I
said.
didn't make it easy on myself. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way. But it had to happen. And ironically, now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, okay, well, work is so important. I'm not sure that I can make the right choices for my life, because work seems to be more important than my life some
And
days.
everything, yeah.
But so I moved to Tofino. It was a very tiny town at that time, and it was just about to explode, I guess, in terms of global popularity. And it's really different now. But at that point, the woman that married my spouse and I was an activist for salmon. And she knew about my background as a dancer and dancing on buildings and dancing on cliffs. And she was thinking, you need to help us protect the salmon. We are the superheroes for salmon, and we want to fly. And I said, well, there's no tall buildings around here. There's no cliffs. I don't know what to do. I can dance in nature. I am a contemporary dancer, but I don't know how to take my practice here. And she said, you have to meet your neighbor. She's a tree climber and a tree rigger.
Awesome.
And then I moved to Tofino, and unfortunately, Gail died. This woman who married us, she had an aneurysm and she just died. She was gone.
Wow.
And I was just left with this phone number. And I called Stephanie and I said, hello, you don't know me, but Gail said we should talk. You're a tree climber. And I'm a dancer, and I'd love to think about dancing with trees. And she just said yes right away. And we started collaborating. She showed up on site. We picked a site at one point, and she showed me how she rigged the trees, and she pulled out this giant crossbow and had this bolt with the fishing line on it, and she used it to shoot a bolt up and over this big old growth tree. And then from that fishing line, we attached a rope and pulled it up, and she taught me the climbing techniques. And we ended up hanging out at the top of this huge cedar tree that was like 500 years old. And it was just so magical. And we became really good friends. And that's how the tree dancing practice started. It started out of needing to dance in Tofino and not having anywhere to dance.
Not having a cliff or a building.
No theater, no appropriate buildings. And so that's how it started.
Wow. I love that. I love that passing on of that idea as well, and how that keeps you connected to Gail. I think that is a thing. Seems to be like the trees, connecting of the trees, the under, network is kind of at play there. I think that is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
So can we get to the choreographing upside down part? Because I kind of, this is a little bit my thing, but I keep thinking, I can't help but think that means you have to plan the choreography upside down a little bit. And for you, it's probably just so instinctual for you now. But I kind of imagine that your process would be quite different and that it has a unique process. But maybe it's only when it goes up that it becomes different. But I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about that, maybe, or how do you train dancers? Do they come to you trained already? And so do you all have a language that is already that vocabulary? Do you teach them that vocabulary in terms of the lingo, like that you would need to use for safety, all of those things? And then what does the dancey process look like? Or how does it unfold, more like, rather than aesthetically look like? But do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's those are a lot of questions, Claire.
I know. I'm so interested though. I mean, I should just come and watch you rehearse, shouldn't I? I should just do that if I can at some point.
Well, it would depend, because the first thing I have to say is the work is always location specific.
Yeah.
It does not tour easily. It has to be recreated in every location, and it has to have a relationship to that location, because with trees, no tree is the same. With cliffs, it's very rare to find a perfectly smooth cliff, and if you did, you may as well dance on a building.
Yes.
You don't get to dance on buildings very long. Normally, like you're against the clock, right? People will say You want to do what? You want to do where, when, why? And they might say, okay, you can do it for 4 hours a day for 5 days. And all of a sudden you have to create a whole show in 5 days. And when maybe it rains for 3 of them.
Yeah.
So I would say when I started out, everything that we discovered as a movement was precious. It became vocabulary, and we knew this is something we can do. And so slowly that vocabulary was discovered piece by piece. And a lot of the times when we were under time pressure, it would be about assembling that vocabulary and selecting some music and doing something that was kind of entertaining and fulfilled the bill of whoever had hired us to place dance in this unique location. And some of our really early supporters were the dance center, because we danced on the building for the opening of the dance center.
I remember that. 2001, right? Yeah.
On 2001. And the street has all of the electric cables for the buses underneath. So we couldn't let our ropes hang down to the ground. And the building it's got those big ledges on it up near the top, which isn't so good for the rope dropping. So we had these tiers. The front of the building, which was on Granville Street, which was the busy street, we wanted to highlight that for the opening. As you know, there's no smooth, easy surface there. So we really discovered and created choreography that suited that building. And that was quite lovely, but it was also very specific. We ended up doing some balancing on the ledge on the 7th floor, which feels really remarkable as a dancer to be high up in the air and standing on one leg in an arabesque or in a handstand or something like that was quite thrilling for us as dancers and for audiences. But once we'd kind of discovered that, you've sort of left an imprint on that place. It's not like I want to go back and create different shows trying to figure out something new there.
No.
And so in the early days, when we didn't have any funding and most of our work was responsive to somebody calling and saying, hey, can you do a performance? We would just do everything we knew how to do and make it look good and work fast and get it done. And then when I was able to get a little bit of grant funding and start to create some full-length shows, I would go back into the theater and sort of bring my contemporary dance roots back into the process and work with the lighting designer and a costume designer and play with the equipment in that context and continue discovering. And in those early days, I would train dancers as we created the shows. Yeah. So if you had some climbing experience or you had the desire, I would maybe take you to the climbing gym or out to the cliffs and we would try a few things. And training people from the first moment, putting the climbing harness on, how to tie your knots, how to stay safe, how to do this movement vocabulary. So I got really good at breaking things down. And one of the things, when you're talking about upside down and how do you create upside down, well, upside down is only one orientation in the vertical dance canon.
Yeah.
When you've got a stage, the ground is down and the grid is up. But that orientation doesn't really change. As a vertical dancer, when you're upside down, your feet are still the ground, basically, right? When you're standing sideways on a wall, the wall is the ground.
Yeah.
So your front of your body, you're always facing front, whichever way your eyes and your breasts and your knees are facing, that's front. You know, your toes are facing. And if you are upside down, your feet are to the sky and your head is to the ground, but that's only one orientation. So, your feet, you can also be feet standing on the wall with your belly facing the sky, right? And then the ground is the wall.
Yeah.
So, you have to get really good at describing those orientations and also not losing your awareness of where you are and how you're going, because all of a sudden it's much more three-dimensional, how gravity's influencing your body, which way you're facing, what happens when you're upside down and you put your feet on the wall and you want to come right side up. How do you do that?
Yeah.
you have to maintain that relationship to your body, basically,
Mm-hmm.
is what I would say. And so I don't really think of it as upside down.
No. And I was thinking of the perpendicular as well. Like there is this sense of it just I don't know if gravity is the right word in this situation, because it feels like feel like that's overloading that in the moment, because from my experience of seeing it and from talking to some dancers who have experienced it, there is that sense of it is decentralized a little bit, but also the grounding is so important to find at all times. But grounding, the word means something different, obviously.
Well, think of it this way. So how gravity is always there, but when you're standing on your feet on the ground, it is pouring down from
Down.
your head to your feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
you are interacting, you're pushing against gravity
Mm-hmm.
every single moment of your life
Mm-hmm.
that you are standing on the ground. That is an act of resistance.
Yes.
When you lie down, your surface area is larger. That gravity is spread out over a larger area, so it's not pushing down on you the
Mm-hmm.
same way, which is why lying down is restful.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of in your harness, when you're lying down and the wall is your floor, the wall is your dance floor, the reason you can jump higher is because you actually have gravity distributed over more of your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that sense of suspension.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for myself, one of the intriguing things about this practice is how the clear connections to physics
Mm-hmm.
and that curiosity about being able to reorient yourself from different perspectives and view the movement from different perspectives while still staying in your body and knowing where you are and where you're facing.
Absolutely.
And not being so concerned about what is down and what is up, but knowing where your center is, knowing what grounding is.
Yeah, and I love that. Just back to the concert dance stuff of like, you're talking about multiple fronts, even though, the body is always front, but the body is not the gaze of the audience. The front body is the front. Yeah, I think it's just like that just really helps to, like, I think for me, give me that really embodied sense of it, instead of like as a spectator watching that, but to imagine a little bit more about what my body would be having to do to be there. I think that's what I'm really very interested
That's also a
in.
trap that vertical dance choreographers can fall into, because we can really fall in love with what's possible when we're facing away from the audience. When
Yeah.
we're facing with our belly up to the sky, we can do these amazing, huge leaps that as a dancer, you don't want to stop doing. You just think,
Mm-hmm.
this is absolutely fantastic. After all these years of trying to get up off the ground doing jetés, here I go. This
Yeah.
jeté has got a hang time of 10 seconds. And I can rotate 5 times. So
Totally
that is
amazing.
thrilling.
Yeah.
But it doesn't serve your connection to the audience
No.
necessarily, right? So this is something for myself, is not a dabbler, somebody who's a specialist and been committed to this kind of work. I've really had to work to discover and remember those connections to the audience that make the work, that make contemporary dance in particular so lovely. That intimacy of expression of emotion, the access to the softening of your chest, and that connection to your face, and all of the emotion that comes with that front of your torso and your face. And so finding ways to bring that into the work, I think, you have to do it as a choreographer. Otherwise, you're kind of just wallpaper or Christmas ornaments or something. It's pretty, but it's not enough.
No, and there's also the conceptual crafting, right? There's the transitioning out of these like wonderful feeling things to the kind of nuts and bolts of like being able to craft a work that then is audiences are engaging in it for that reason, for its whole. Yeah, that's so great. Could you talk a little bit about, in the context of what you've learned from your different experiences and on different projects, what would be the ultimate highs and lows, pardon the pun, not like in terms of verticality, but in terms of your emotional like sense of a project, maybe, the kind of best and worst of times within a dance kind of production context, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I will just start by saying it's really intense. And we mentioned earlier on, you did not see yourself taking a path as a choreographer, and I did not see myself taking a path as an artistic director. In my case, it was because I had two close friends who were artistic directors, and I saw how challenging that job was and how little support they had. And I just thought, oh gosh, I never want to do that. I'm happy to support somebody who's doing that, but I don't want to do that job. And so now at this point, that's my job. And I still kind of feel that way. Actually, I am kind of bossy by nature, and I really do appreciate the complexity of this job, and it's not for everybody. There's just such a wide range of skills that I've had to learn as life or death, and some things I had no training in because I was such an artist. I never went to school and learned anything practical, never learned anything about budgets or how to write or anything like that. And yet these are life and death skills. And
absolutely.
In running a dance production company,
especially yours. It's risk management.
You can't afford not to be able to write and not to be able to budget and not to be able to negotiate and figure out all of these things. So I've learned all of these things on the job, and I think I'm pretty good at it because I'm still doing it. But it is really tough. And there's been points in my path with different projects where the vision has been so ambitious and so intense that by the time everything gets set up and it's in motion, I sort of feel numb and drained, and I can't.
Exhausted.
I just can't enjoy it.
But then the audiences do, and the dancers do, and the whole, there's a sense of it kind of leaving you and the motivation and everything is picked up by other people, right? Which is kind of a beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, yes, I just have to acknowledge how much support people have given me, how much trust they've given me, how much of their time they've given this work. And the trust is enormous. And so it really is very special in that way. And so that's really, really rewarding. And it's interesting because starting off when I was dancing, I was so involved in myself as an athlete and myself as a dancer. I really never thought about anything else. If it didn't apply to me, I didn't think about it, honestly. I was not that I was just a greedy, selfish person. I had lovely relationships and appreciation of the world and nature and people and things. But ultimately, in terms of what I was doing, it was taking care of myself and making sure that my body could function and that I was a dancer. And everything was framed that way. And in order to become the director of Aeriosa and to lead all of these people, I've had to totally change who I am. I barely even feel like a dancer anymore, actually, which I'm really sad about, and I really need to change at this point in my career. I kind of need to come full circle and make it more personal again, because I feel like I've really sacrificed so much of my own life and health and time that where it all started, it's all gone so far in a different direction, and it's really rewarding in a different way, but it's just not healthy. And I'm starting to really feel that as I get older.
I hope you do find that for yourself and you do pull that back, because I think that would be an amazing offering as well to the world, to come back around to that.
I want to go back to the chief.
I was just going to say, to do that piece again, or to do something there again with all of this experience and all of this knowledge and all of this wisdom, embodied and kind of, thrown at you from the outside wisdom, it would just be, even if it wasn't even for anybody else, even if it wasn't a film, just for you, I think it just, So I'd like to talk, or maybe we can just finish around this. I'm going to tie in a few ideas that I've shared with you beforehand, but just around collaboration, producing the work of other artists. And I'm going to tie in with that you won the Crystal Dance Prize this year. And there are all sorts of things that you and your collaborators and collaborations are kind of, there's a lot of germination happening. You have a lot of generative ideas and other people's work as well. So the question is around collaborations, now you moving into producing other people's work, but also it seems like with the Crystal Dance Prizes, there's an international component. And collaboration is really big and producing is really, really big. And could you talk a little bit about that project for the Crystal Dance Prize and also you producing other works? Because I think that's a really exciting space, especially in our conversation around expanding dance and expanding dance perspectives.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that because I really do feel like for myself, this awareness of becoming a producer is, again, it just sort of happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't part of the plan, but I think it kind of was. But, so the project for the Crystal Dance Prize is something that's been in the making for many years now, and we're so thrilled to have that support. There's an artist in Croatia. Her name is Marija Šćekić. And she actually trained at Concordia and won a prize for choreography there back in the day. But she went home to Croatia after the war. She came to Canada partially because of the war there. And I'm quite drawn to her because she found her own practice in the mountains in Croatia, and she had no other dancers to work with. She recruited the mountain rescue team to support her in her work and recruited the national park to produce her performances in the canyon, and she's making site-specific work. And I was just thrilled. It's so thrilling when you think, wow, I'm really discovering something new for myself. But then when you find that other people are discovering it too, you really start to think, well, we always have to remember that. I think just because something's new to us doesn't mean it's new. This type of work has been going on for many, many years. And the fact that I've met these artists all around the world who've had similar, they're alone and they have an idea and then they build it from nothing. And so I've met other vertical dance choreographers that have basically gone through the same revelations and process that I have. And Marija's one of them. And so we have this opportunity to create a theater performance that's going to feature her work with some Aeriosa dancers, and for me to bring some of my most recent choreography over to continue developing it and bring it over to her hometown of Đakovo, which is in eastern Croatia near the border with Serbia, and is a city that was quite affected by the war.
Yeah.
And we're also going to go back to the mountains where Marija's established a relationship in the Paklenica region, which is the Velebit Mountains, and they're on the coast in Dalmatia. And they're these beautiful limestone mountains where General Tito actually hollowed out the mountains to create a home for his army back in the day when that was the plan. So that infrastructure still exists inside these mountains, and there's a gallery and a theater space and a cafe and all these places where we can use to stage our events. Plus, we're getting permission to use these climbing routes to actually stage a performance in collaboration with Sarah Fuller, who creates these camouflage garments so that we can connect to the landscape and call attention to some of the endangered species in the canyon. There's all of these connections coming in. For me, the end of one piece, that relationship it's kind of hard to leave. And so I always feel like my last work is a starting place for the next work. There's always those connections. And quite often it's the people that are the connections, the collaborators that you really connect to, that you want to pick up and do another project with because it was so satisfying the first time.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So the Croatia project is going to be a multi-year project.
Yeah.
We'll be doing some workshopping of these two very different presentations in different regions of Croatia in September, and then continuing to develop them on location in those communities over the following years. And then Marija will be coming to Vancouver and bringing an iteration of something that we're doing together.
So wonderful. Will you have time to actually document the process with Aeriosa on your website or something? Because I think people would probably be quite interested in trying to follow this project over the years. I think that would be amazing, especially going inside the mountains. I love that idea that now you're going inside the mountains. I mean, just when we thought you couldn't go find any other space to do you're going inside. So yeah, it's totally amazing.
Exactly.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that yes, we will be documenting it. I mean, Maria's she's nurtured a really amazing crew of photographers and
Great.
videographers that she works with and who can edit video really quickly.
Nice.
And one of the dancers who's been working with Aeriosa since 2003, Chandra Crown, is also branching out into video editing and filmmaking. And so she's going to be coming along on that project as well. And
Fabulous.
And he happens to manage our social media and things like that and update our website. So yes, I think there's a really good tie in there for that diary.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's so good. And then you have then you're producing other people's works. And I believe that this is what we'll be seeing at the Dance Center. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, Aeriosa has a long-term artist-in-residence relationship with Butterflies in Spirit, and they are a group of family members who advocate for their missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, mothers, grandmothers, the other families as well. And we started working together in 2017 when I asked them to participate in a performance we were co-creating with Spakwa Slolum in Stanley Park. And we wanted to bring the community together to do different performances in the park. And Butterflies had been recommended to me, and they were very sweet and showed up and explained why they were dancing. And this is part of my journey towards dance as healing, and that understanding is that these women are professional dancers now. They've celebrated their 10th anniversary, but they started out, they danced for a reason, and that was because they needed to call attention to their lives and their families' lives. And they shut down a Granville in Georgia with this message. And so dance having a purpose that is so vital and so important is something that's really means something to me as a contemporary dancer. Sometimes you wonder, why am I doing this? And who understands it? And there weren't any people there.
Yeah, we're just doing it for each other,
Exactly.
like in the dance community sometimes. Yeah.
And so, so recognizing how vital the work that the Butterflies is in terms of them being able to do their own healing and help with the healing of others is something that really compels me. And establishing that relationship between us where I can provide some administrative support and help with some of the nitty gritty that I've had to go through to get where I am as an artistic director. To make that easier for other artists.
Yeah, absolutely. To carry some of that weight, right? And some
and to give them the flexibility. I mean, really, they're advocates and activists, so they need to be one step removed from some of these designations and hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah, amazing.
And so that's become another thing that's really important to me that makes my work meaningful.
Yeah.
So there's that. And it is really interesting because it often challenges just even what I know and how things are supposed to be done, and just seeing what happens when people have time and money to really do what they want to do is quite an eye opener too, because you start to realize a lot of things, what they're really suffering from is time and money.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because it gives you space to be able to think differently if you're not in survival mode. It is a privileged space, but it shouldn't be a white privileged space in that same way. It's not the same kind of privileged space. Because you have to be ready to be able to think differently if you have the time and the money. I think that's the point. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just that's so great. So we will see this work in May.
Yeah, what you're going to see in May, it's quite interesting because, we're talking a little bit about the Butterflies. And the thing about the Butterflies is that we've created a work to honor their 10th anniversary, which was produced at the Playhouse last April 30th. So we're almost coming up on the 1 year anniversary.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing I've ever produced. There was like 95 artists and designers and crew members involved, and most of them were Indigenous. So that was really exciting for me, and to see that sense of family and those connections, and to do a 4-hour show.
Oh, wow.
that really gave people a sense of, hey, this is how we do it, right?
Yeah. Hey, you and spectacle seem to live together, don't they? I see what you mean about work taking over your life. I mean, it's not just work, it's like spectacle. Massive.
Exactly. And then so all of a sudden realizing, oh my gosh, this is a huge production, and realizing, hey, this is kind of an interesting job, because on the day I wasn't dancing, I wasn't doing anything. I was just kind of walking around, saying hello to people, working on things. And at that point my work was done. So it was quite exciting. And then, but in this, so we're going to be presenting some excerpts of that work, because what happened is during COVID, one of the butterflies who choreographed a duet, she got COVID, her partner got COVID. So Aeriosa dancers had to step in. They weren't able to perform in this really important community event. They didn't get to dance their own choreography. And so this is an opportunity to continue sharing our practice with the harness dancing and bring that work to a dance center audience, because audience at the Playhouse was not the dance center audience. It's a very different audience.
Yeah. And it's great because there's an intimacy to this presentation, right? That we wouldn't. Yeah. It's great. It's
but then the other part of it is Landon Krantz, who is a deaf theater artist.
Yes.
And so I've been working with Landon. He's come in to do some workshops with us. We did our first one just before COVID hit. And we did it. So 2020, I think in April, we managed to squeak out a few days of practice or something like that. And then, or maybe it was February. And then the next time we saw each other was at the Playhouse before they reopened.
Right.
They let us come in and do a workshop on stage, which was so amazing. And so he's coming back, and what we're trying to do together, and we're figuring out, and this is the first time we're going to be able to try and share that concept with the audience, is find a way to bring deaf, hard of hearing, and hearing audiences together without, it's not about creating a work that's accessible for deaf audiences by adding ASL interpretation. That's not really what it's about. It's about recognizing that ASL is a unspoken language, dance is an unspoken language. There's a lot of cultural connection between choreography and sign language and how communication in deaf culture, because it's so visual. So a lot of things you don't do as a hearing person, like tap someone on the shoulder or stand right in front of someone or walk in between two people, that we don't even understand as hearing people that these are normal parts of deaf culture, and that the way that we relate to each other could use less talking and more physical interaction, more proximity, more paying attention to each other, like paying attention.
Yes.
So I'm really intrigued to sort of discover those connections between deaf culture, ASL, and movement practice.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you know the date of the event?
Yes, it's May 18th.
May 18th.
It's May 18th, and it's part of the Discover Dance series. So it's the noontime performance. It's a nice, easy ticket price and easy length, because it fits into about an hour.
And I go to these sometimes, and sometimes I do the talk back for these, and I've always had a wonderful time at them. The conversations are always very exciting, and it kind of grows. The interest grows from the experience of the presentation to the conversation to when people are leaving. Like, they're always such wonderful events to go to. Oh, this is really exciting, Julia. I think that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I would love to. Well, we could keep going with other projects, but we've got so much information. I think this is a really good place to end, and I just want to, I really look forward to seeing that show and to seeing whatever we can see film-wise, of documentation-wise, of the other work that you're doing. But yeah, this has been really wonderful. It's been lovely to get to know you and your work and your journey a little more for all of that. Yeah, great. Well,
thank you, Claire.
Pleasure. And I'll see you in the in the flesh, perpendicular, upside down, or straight up very soon.
I look forward to that.
Okay, great. Thanks so much again. Bye for now.
Okay, bye for now.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Centre, Twitter at Dance Centre, and Instagram at The Dance Centre BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecentre.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Centre podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.